Hey Lauren, thanks so much for joining the show today. To get started, can you give the listeners a little bit of your history and background in UX?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me. So I'm Lauren Brewer. I'm a UX director at IBM iX. A little bit about my background. I started my career after graduating with a journalism degree at the Atlanta Falcons and worked there for a year before I kind of freelanced. And then I came to IBM and kind of worked my way through multiple different design organizations to finally kind of end up doing what I'm doing now, which is leading design teams for our communications market, which includes telco, ENU, and then also media and entertainment. So a fun group. I work a lot with our telco partners, but that's a lot of what I do currently.
And you mentioned IBM iX. For those of us not familiar, what is that division?
Yeah, so IBM has a rich culture in design. I think a lot of us have heard of Paul Rand, and he very much made our brand, what it is. And then IBM iX is our agency kind of model of design. So it fits in our services business, and we interface with clients much like agencies do. So that's
Okay.
IBM iX.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. Can you talk a little bit about your team, which I know has grown, and how you approach growing a team of designers and other people on the team as well?
Yeah, I think so. IX does have a large amount of designers. Some of them, sit and they work across different industries. Some of us sit and work with particular industries. And then my current team works with a specific large telco client. And I think we're up to about 17, give or take, designers or creatives, including some research folks. So
Yeah.
we're fairly large. And that team is really grown by looking for the right people as we work on different projects and we talk to clients about their needs. It's what skill sets do we need? What can we bring to the table from hybrid designers, who I think all of us kind of hate that term sometimes, of like, can you do the UX and the UI, or like, should designers also code? Everybody has their opinions. And then also the people who really specialize. So some really strong visual designers who are very much creative directors, and then the strong UX folks who like to dig into the architecture and the problems and figure out the flows. So our team is made up of a lot of those different types of designers.
Yeah, absolutely. Who do you look to for inspiration in the field?
I listen to a lot of podcasts, like the Design Better podcast. I think they've hit this mark pretty well. And then I read a lot of like random design books. Some of them may be focused on different areas of design, like Kat Holmes. I'll give her a shout out. She wrote a pretty incredible book on accessibility, but I think she also talks a lot about the different disciplines, because I think a lot of people think like development and visual design should focus on accessibility, but really it's everyone
Yeah.
should focus on it.
Mm.
So I find a lot of inspiration in the way that she approaches different things from all the different companies that she's been at. But a lot of it is just like podcasts and other things, and people who work on my teams. They kind of push the boundaries, and occasionally will be like, hey, have you read this? And I'm like, absolutely not. I have not read that. So send it my way. So a lot of it is that it's just like organically having a team who wants to grow and talk about those things, and making it a space where it's like, hey, nobody else may be interested in it, but it may be because they don't know that it exists, because
Yeah.
design is changing all of the time. So like some people just have, their different things that they're interested in. When they bring them to the table, you kind of get the opportunity to lean in and read other things for sure.
To this point, Lauren, I think another interesting thing, I was reading an article. It's titled something like "The reason you dislike your job isn't just because of it's a bad job, it's because of the poor UX." And I think that, especially at some legacy companies, there's just archaic software and archaic employee experience where the employee is hopping from Slack, Google, uh, Zoom, LinkedIn, great experiences, to internal tools that are just not following Jacob's law, or you just haven't been thought about, I haven't had the same dedication as a B2C tool has from, a dedicated design team. Do you focus on that level of employees experience? Like, what are the tools our employees have to interact with, and their process should follow great UX and usability principles as well?
Right. It's actually interesting. So I think there's a lot to kind of unpack there. There's the piece of the employees who are interfacing with customers, and like that's a core part of their job. And then
Yeah.
there's the employees who just like have all these tools that if you actually started to look at them, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense of why they have to use so many things. Which design ops is very emerging right now. It's another trend that's kind of out there. And a lot of that is looking at, okay, why do we have 7 different design tools? Like,
Yeah.
why are we using so many things, even to like communicate or to track things? And so I think that part is something that working from home has like kind of blown open, because we have some people probably didn't have a monitor or random things like that. And then they're trying to do all these things on one machine that just like gets overloaded. So I think it is one that people are going to start to talk a lot about. I think designers are starting to talk about it. Like, hey, why do we have to go through so many steps to like even do our jobs to build great experiences for other people, which is kind of ironic when you really think about it. But now we're starting to talk about those things. So I think it's going to be one that people start to like really hone in on and focus on, and try to widen their horizon of like, okay, it's not just the end customer, it's all these other possibilities. And how do you start to link them together at some point? Because you don't just want to build like, oh, well, when I'm doing my job that's only internal, I use this tool, and then I have to go over here if I'm talking to a customer. Like, it's a bad experience. So it's how do we start to help people, solve some of those problems, and even see that that is a problem, because sometimes you don't know until you start to uncover it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just thinking about our workday and previous roles and current roles that I have. It's just like, how many SaaS tools am I touching every day and just hopping around? And I could use probably 5 to accomplish the same communication task. And it's just like honestly overwhelming. So how have you approached building a culture that designers want to be at or be a
Yeah.
part
Well, I hope that I've done a good job. I
of? Yeah,
guess we'll see once we
there's
post this,
massive
right?
backlash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll find out. We can poll the audience afterwards. I think a lot of it has been, I approach it in a way of like, I want to see my team look like the world, because I think that's the best way to get what your end users look like, no matter what type of user that is. Like, the world is very diverse and comes from, different backgrounds and all of the things that we think of when we think of diversity. So that's kind of the first thing I think about when I think about culture. Like, I don't want a bunch of people who look like me all the time, or think like me, or have my background or like trajectories, how I got to where I was. So I think that's the first approach, is building a team that's diverse, and then allowing them to kind of get to know one another. We do a lot of things where we try to bring designers from different teams together to talk about their work, but to also talk about like, what are things they want to know? Because a lot of times you may be a bit afraid to like go find someone whose job you think is cool and ask them a bunch of questions. I got that advice recently from one of our IBM leaders. He was like, just go send some people some emails. If you want their job one day, like ask them how they got it.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to give that advice back of like, we try to have some forums where they can tell us topics they want to look at, and then we go try to find the people who are actually real experts in it, instead of just a couple of our design leads being like, here's what we know. And there are times where we are the experts in things, but there are other times where we recently had a designer who wanted to understand like, how do you actually get all the way through from a business perspective of like starting work all the way through delivering it. And I was like, that's actually, a really good question, and a very business-based question. So we found some leaders on our team to come and kind of like talk through what are all the different things that actually happen in the background that most of the time designers are just like, when do I start the work? Like, and so it's those types of things I think that have really built our culture of saying, it's a safe space to come and talk about what you want, but it's also a safe space to like be like, I don't know anything about this and I'd like to. So how does somebody help me facilitate that? And I think that has significantly impacted my approach. And then I have someone else who I've worked with for I think we're going on like 3.5 years at this point. She's very visual. Her name's Stephanie Stobart. So shouts to you, Steph. She's very visual and I'm very UX. So we always say like we're a good marriage of skills. We have a lot of common interests, but we definitely like our disciplines. So how does she bring things to me that like I probably wouldn't think about from a cultural perspective for visual designers of, hey, they may want some education in this space, but I don't necessarily do those things every day. So I may not see them and kind of vice versa. And then just the things in the middle, like in a pandemic where all of us are working from home and like remote work is going to be a thing going forward. How do you culturally build a team that's never met each other and may never meet each other is really hard because designers we're people who have a lot of empathy. We like to connect with people. So we've tried a couple of different things. We have a young designer who does a question of the day every day for our design team.
Nice.
They're hysterical. One week it was like, if you were on a desert island and you could only bring one album, what would it be? Or like, what's your favorite breakfast food was today's. So just those sorts of things that you get to know other people and you feel like you're in an office environment where like you sit down and you have lunch and you talk about random things. We try to create that virtually. So I think that's really the main way that we kind of approach it and that I try to approach it.
Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.